So for members of the committee, if we could just observe the normal Teams etiquette, please use the raise hands functions to indicate if you want to speak, and perhaps keep your camera off when you're not speaking to preserve bandwidth. Just to ask Lindsay, first of all, have we got any apologies for this meeting, please?
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor Fabrizio Mabina.
Yeah, to Councillor Mabina from our colleague from Sandwell, so we'll note his apologies. Any other apologies?
No, that's it, Chair. Great,
thank you, Lindsay. And then does anyone have any direct declarations of interest that they want to make for this meeting from that's addressed to members of the committee? Not seeing any hands or hearing anyone, so I'll take that as no declarations covering this meeting. So just to say that today we've got a really interesting agenda, quite a packed one. In some ways, the way that the meetings of the Combined Authority have fallen at the beginning of the year hasn't really suited us, because we're going to be talking about a number of papers that went to the WMCA board on Friday for noting and decision, but I think they're really crucial matters for transport, covering the future of bus, the local transport plan, and the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. So I wanted to get an update for us as scrutiny members, and for us to understand the next steps and ask the questions that we've got, so that we can hold the board to account for the decisions that they're making. But we're also going to have an update on Swift and exciting new options that there are for ticketing around the region, and I think that will be a really good chance to look at how we're making it easier for people to buy their tickets and actually take advantage of the public transport network, because we're hoping really this year that people will feel more confident about coming back to public transport. So lots in front of us today, so let's crack on. The minutes for our November meeting have been circulated with the agenda. Are there any comments on those for accuracy, and does anyone have any matters arising from those minutes, please? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised about the minutes, so I'll move on. Our first item on the agenda is the reply that we received from Councillor Ian Ward, who is the portfolio lead for transport on the Combined Authority, and he's written to us, responding to a number of questions that we put to him in our Q&A session with him on the 8th of November. If you remember, we had lots of questions about particularly about the Commonwealth Games and how that's going to be managed, and a lot of other issues. And he's given us quite a detailed response, and he's also pointed out that a number of issues that we posed him for follow-up have already been worked into our agenda for the next few months. And Lindsay has met with a number of the relevant officers to programme that. But I wanted to just ask members of the committee if they have any questions about what Councillor Ward has put in his letter of reply to us.
Liz, can I chip in?
Yep, absolutely. Glad to hear from you, because
yeah,
otherwise I'm wondering whether everyone is just.
Lindsay, when you were making a little comments or speech, I can hear your voice is distorting. It's not coming clear.
Okay, is anyone else having difficulty hearing me?
No, I can hear perfectly well, Liz.
No, I can hear you, but your voice is distorting. Can't understand properly.
I can't see you.
I mean, if people want to put their cameras back on, that's fine. So I probably just use the Birmingham Convention there. It's up to you if people want to come back online. If there's not a general problem of hearing me speak, I'll attempt to speak slower, because I know I have I do tend to speak fast, think fast, talk fast, which is not necessarily a good thing. So always have to try and slow down. But I'm sorry you're having difficulties hearing me. But at the moment, there's not much I can do about that apart from go onto the mobile phone. But I'll press on for the moment.
It's much better now, Les. Thanks very much.
Okay,
much
thank
better.
you.
It's
So does
much better
anyone
now.
have any questions about Ian Ward's response to our session with him last autumn? Okay, that doesn't seem to be the case. And in view of what we've got ahead of us, I'll press on then with the agenda. Have we got Anne with us now?
Yes, yes, sorry, I am here.
Hi, Anne. Sorry, I wasn't.
Morning.
Welcome. And the first thing I should do is congratulate you on your appointment as Executive Director of Transport for the West Midlands. That's really excellent news. Congratulations. Yeah, and yes, thank you very much for taking time out to join us this morning to give us an update on the metro and what the follow-up from the suspension and the plans for the extension. You've sent us a briefing note which was circulated with the agenda. So it'd be good if you could just talk briefly to that and then take questions from members of the committee.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Councillor Clements. Just to go through the briefing note itself, we've given you some background detail, which is what I came and briefed you last time in terms of why or what we're dealing with in terms of the maintenance of the trams themselves. I'm pleased to say that we've got a good repair programme underway. We already had a number that had gone through that full repair anyway, as well as working hard to bring the new trams that we've got available to us into service, and we've got a number of those now out on the network. We resumed services towards the end of last year through to Library, working on a 10-minute headway, and last Friday we announced our intention to run back to the Library service on the 30th of January, as we've got more and more trams becoming available to us as part of that. So that's good news in terms of that, and obviously we'll be working hard to bring the rest of those trams back in. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks to do the full repair for the bogey box cracks that we talked about, and then we're also in the process of finding locations for us to deal with some of the other body frame cracks which are not safety critical that we're dealing with as well. So good progress is being made on that repair programme. We've got confidence in the fleet in terms of safety and then the sustainability of those trams being in service as well. There are other general maintenance things that we will be carrying out that obviously we need to do as part of operating those trams. I think you also asked us for a little bit of information about roles and responsibilities between MML as the operator, who look after both the existing infrastructure and also run the operations. TFWM, who've got overall responsibility for managing the whole of the Metro programme, including the relationship with the operator and then also the relationship with the Midland Metro Alliance, who are designing and constructing the new extensions as well. So hopefully the information that's in the briefing note was useful in terms of clarifying those roles and responsibilities as well. In terms of the extensions being opened, in fact, I was a little bit late just because I was on a meeting talking about the Broad Street extension and works that need to be completed as part of that. We're just waiting for some of the outstanding issues.
You're breaking up a bit.
Apologies. We're just waiting for some of the outstanding issues that we're working through with the Business Improvement District, the likes of Brindley Place, etc., around those as well, to confirm the traffic regulation orders and to finish off those works. And I'm expecting a revised programme for that from MMA as well. And similarly with the extension in Wolverhampton, we've been doing some work with Network Rail around what the bit which runs in front of Wolverhampton Station will look like, and getting agreement around pedestrian safety in particular around that as well. And again, working through a revised schedule for that, which we will come to a later date. We'll be able to confirm that in more detail. But I think that's all I was going to update on, Councillor Clements. So if there's any further information or any questions that anybody's got, I'm happy to try and answer those.
Great, thanks very much, Anne. Yes, and the note was very comprehensive, and it was very useful to get the information about the governance structures, which are quite complicated. So I think it was useful for us to have that context for this discussion. And I've got the first question from Councillor Martin McCarthy. Go ahead, Martin.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I've just been dropped out of the meeting and rejoined, so I may have missed your last sort of.
Oh, I think we've lost Councillor McCarthy again.
He's frozen. I know that Martin will have a number of questions, so we'll hope that he can rejoin. And I'll move it to Barbara, Councillor McGarity from Wolverhampton. Go ahead, Barbara, and let's hope that Martin can rejoin us.
Right, thank you, Chair. Congratulations, Anne, on your promotion. Well done.
Thank you.
Just to add, the Wolverhampton extension, I was told that would be finished in January, but we're here now in January. Could you elaborate on a date when it should be finished, please?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we are working through. We've got discussions that we're having with Network Rail. I think you're probably aware that there's a pedestrian crossing requirement outside of Wolverhampton Station.
Yeah.
There was a meeting with them, well, more than a meeting, a decision point with them on Thursday last week. They've asked for a few clarifications, and once we've got confirmation from Network Rail in terms of the design for that crossing, we'll be able to put a firm date around the construction. So I will bring that back to the next available meeting, but certainly, Councillor McGarity, we will make sure that Wolverhampton colleagues are fully aware of that with the work that we're doing jointly with them, so that that programme can be updated as and when we've got that confirmation.
Right, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for the question, Barbara. Now back to Martin.
I think he's frozen again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe you could put his question in the chat.
Okay, yeah. And in the meantime, I can see that Councillor Hare's got. Is that your? You've raised your hand, Councillor Hare. Is that a new question, or is that hangover from the previous?
Yeah. I'd like to ask her, and she will mention repair the track. What is she mentioned outstanding issue? What are the outstanding issues are? Can she go a bit more detail of that, please?
So the outstanding issues in terms of the repair programme.
What are they?
Yeah, so the outstanding issues really is just getting through the repairs. Each tram has got to have those repairs done. So we've already completed 9 with that full repair, which has allowed us, alongside the new trams coming into service, to make that service running through to Bull Street. There is a programme that will take us through the rest of this year for those full repairs to the bogie box to be made to all of those second generation trams. So it's not an outstanding issue, it's just the order in which they need to go in. We can only do one at a time. So again, it's just that programme as part of that.
Thanks, Anne. And I've got Martin, who I'm going to bring back in next, but I just wanted to say that in the briefing, it says that programme of repairs to the bogie box, which I understand is effectively the chassis, isn't it? Those are going to go on until summer of 2022. So when I read that, I was just slightly concerned, because that's really hard up against the Commonwealth Games deadline. So are we absolutely certain that that's going to be delivered and there's going to be no further problems?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, they are well underway, and the teams are working hard on doing those. We've got every couple of weeks we've got a tram coming back into service, and alongside the new trams that are coming into service as well, we have sufficient trams to make the services during Commonwealth Games. Councillor Clements.
Great, thank you very much. And now Councillor McCarthy.
Yeah, I'm not having much luck, am I? I seem to get gagged every time I try and say something. But okay,
it's the system.
Thank you for the report. It has excellent characterisation of the different cracks, so we know we're not talking about the same thing, which is a big step forward. The one thing that it doesn't mention is, do you understand the root cause of the cracks? I mean, I'm not asking for any breach of commercial confidentiality here. I just want assurance from you that you understand and have documented this root cause.
Yes,
they're ongoing.
Yeah, there is ongoing works to agree that the root causes are the root causes. So I won't say much more than that. But yes, between both ourselves and also through the manufacturer and the evidence that we're collecting from those other parts of the world which are having similar problems, those root causes are well documented.
Okay, and at some time, once it's no longer commercially sensitive, will they be shared with us?
Yeah, subject to any sort of confidentiality that we have. Yeah, we can certainly look at ways in which we can sort of give a little bit more information through to the Scrutiny Committee. Yeah,
it's just a statement that you know that we can be clear that you have within the system and according to the regulator have completed this piece of work, so that we can have confidence that the actions that we've taken will indeed result in a safe and robust service.
Yeah, okay. And it may be that we can do that in a private briefing as well, so we can give a bit more detail.
Yeah, I think that was the plan last time. Didn't quite make it into the minutes. I mean, I read them last night and looked at the report and thought just about covers that item. But perhaps we can minute that too this time. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll make sure that's in the minutes. But I think I remember from the last discussion, that Anne had already indicated to us that she was open to having a private session with us, and I think we'd certainly do that when it's possible to do so. So I know we will have an ongoing interest in this area. And from my point of view, I'm interested in, do you have an overview of what the passenger numbers are since the reopening? Because one of the things that I'd learned in one of the BCC scrutiny meetings was that the metro had actually bounced back, relatively speaking, much better than other public transport modes after the lockdowns. So I hope that trend's going to continue now that the service is running again.
Yeah, that's right, and certainly that's what we're seeing is larger numbers of people have come back to the tram. Obviously, we know that a lot of people depend on it. So I think the figures, the only way I can do it is to compare them to pre-COVID figures. We're seeing reductions on all of our public transport, so it is operating at about 80%. But I'll double check the figures whilst the committee goes on, and I can post that the actual figure in the chat if that's okay, Councillor Clements. That'd be really helpful, but that sounds encouraging because I've read in Pete's paper that that bus passenger levels are up to about 75% of pre-COVID numbers. Because again, I'd understood that the metro, the profile of the passengers, is that there's a lot of people who are key workers taking the metro in from Wolverhampton and people doing frontline jobs. So it's really important that they've got a reliable service. So this is really good news to know that things are back on track and that the extensions are going to be opening up. And is there anything more precise that you can say about the timetable for the reopening, the opening of the extensions? No, I think once I've got confirmation from the work that the team are doing this week, based on those two sets of conversations that I mentioned, so the Broad Street traffic regulation, working with the businesses, and the pedestrian requirements outside Wolverhampton Station, working with Network Rail. Once I've got confirmation of those, I will get some more confirmed delivery schedules that I'll be able to share. And the final thing that I'd like to ask, when will we get a financial overview of the financial losses that were incurred during the period of suspension? So the finance team are working through those. We've been keeping a good track of what those are. So if that's something that the committee would want to see, I'll work with finance to try and get that information available to you. It's very difficult though, because some of the reasons why people aren't travelling, particularly with the variant that we had just before Christmas with COVID, that also had an impact on people travelling anyway. So all of the costs might not be totally attributable to the tram network being out of action, because some people would have stopped travelling as well. But we'll work through that financial information and work out how we can best report back on that, Councillor Clements, in between meetings. Thanks very much, and I'd welcome that, because I think just a number of things sort of hang on the fare box revenue from the metro, don't they? So I think it's good for us to understand what happened over the full financial year. Are there any more questions from councillors on the committee? It's our chance to ask Anne. She's here taking time for us. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment. I know we'll come back to this because a number of us are passionately interested in it and want to be sure that there's a reliable tram service as it grows. But at this point, then I'd like to thank Anne for taking the time to brief us on the restoration of the tram service, and yes, congratulate you again on your appointment as executive director, and wish you all the best for the coming year. And yeah, see you again soon. Bye. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Clements. Bye. Okay, I'm just scrolling back up my agenda. Okay, so we've now completed our discussions on Metro this morning, and onto bus and future bus options, where Pete Bond has joined us to talk about the paper that went to the CA board on Friday. Obviously, this is a CA board paper, and it's one of three that are on our agenda today, so that we understand the
decisions that the CA board has made on this. So Pete, if you could just talk us through the paper briefly, and then pick out the key issues and the challenges facing the bus network at the moment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. And just to first of all start off, it's going to be myself, and Steve Hayes has also joined us, and Steve has prepared, as we discussed, just a couple of brief slides to take members through, because I think there was also an interest in actually what do we do beyond the report and the decision making. And although that is in its infancy, given the decision was on Friday, there's probably just a couple of little bits that we will be able to share through with members. So Steve will come in a couple of moments, if that's okay, Chair, and just give.
That's super. Yeah. Morning, Steve. Thanks for joining us. And yes, I think a couple of slides would be very helpful, because I've read the paper and actually watched the YouTube of the board discussion that was interesting. But I think we do need to get some signposting through all of this.
Absolutely. So just for all members, and noting there, Chair, that you've watched the YouTube, but just for everybody's benefit, the board report that went on Friday was approved. As written, the report that's in the pack, and of course the report was covering off several areas. Firstly, to set out to the Combined Authority Board perhaps the level of risks that is faced on bus service delivery currently, and that's largely associated with COVID recovery and the challenges of bus service delivery as we continue to see the vast majority of bus services across the UK supported in some way, shape or form by government funding, due to the fact that patronage levels of return have been started off relatively fast, but have slowed down across the country as well. But in addition to that, the paper is also bringing an update around the bus delivery options, and as were brought forward, requested by the Combined Authority back prior to the pandemic at the back end of 2019, and they were to look at actually the region's assessment of how we deliver bus services and how we deliver the vision for bus. And of course, as set out in the report, since then there's been a whole host of things happen. The government have launched the National Bus Strategy. They've then subsequently requested all local transport authorities to submit a BSIP, that's a bus service improvement plan, with their requests on how they're going to deliver the ambitious targets for buses and how they intend to deliver them. So obviously that is also factored into our assessment of future delivery. So the two key points associated with the report are the commitment to move towards an enhanced partnership for the region, and that is, we already have an enhanced partnership in the West Midlands as set out, but for Sprint. So this would see us moving towards an enhanced partnership for all services. And I think the report was trying to set out the significance of that, because enhanced partnership is not business as usual. It requires a significant level of effort, investment, time, and will from all parties, including local authorities and highway authorities, as well as bus operators and the Transport Authority. But then also the report sets out the assessment work undertaken to date around bus franchising, and sets out there is a case for further levels of intervention. Just one point to note, it did say in Councillor Ward's response, it sets out a case for further levels of regulation. The point being there, just a slight nuance on it, but it didn't set out a case for further level of regulation. It set out a further level of intervention, one option of which could be regulation, of course. So the work approved by the authority on Friday will allow us to move forward with a further assessment, what is called a full franchising assessment. The language that we use is kind of full business case, because those things are pretty similar, but not exact in terms. So that gives you a flavour for the report and what was approved. And then at that point, I'll ask Chair if Steve could just come in with the update on the next steps around that.
Yes, please go ahead, Steve.
Okay, you should be able to see the slides. Just confirm.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just run through what the next steps entail and some of the high-level timescales around this. I won't repeat this slide. This is the background, so this is what Pete's just been talking about, but these are the recommendations, specific recommendations that were approved at the CA board on Friday. So in terms of required activity, so the things listed on this slide are essential activities that we will be required to undertake over the coming weeks, months and years in some cases in order to deliver the objectives of our Vision for Bus, our bus service improvement plan, and ensure we achieve the wider objectives of bus policy in the region. Now, the things on this slide, I suppose, are specifically things which we believe can all be delivered through enhanced partnership. So Pete's mentioned some of the network challenges that we face. We will need to work through that with operators and develop further partnerships between ourselves and between operators. So we've already got some good examples on the network of where operators work together to deliver coordinated frequencies on some of the competitive corridors. We'll be seeking to do a lot more of that, although that has been quite challenging in the past. It will require considerable commitment. We've got a commitment to secure zero emission fleet by 2030. We know that some operators are more enthusiastic about that than others, but that will need to be something that we work with operators to understand how that can be achieved through partnership. We'll need to think about depot strategy as well, and that's linked to the decarbonisation of buses, because depots will need to be upgraded to accommodate electric vehicles or hydrogen fuelling or other zero emission fuel sources. Not all operators might have the capacity capability to do that, so we'll need to think about how we can work with other operators to deliver that, and also help support a thriving competitive bus market, because we know there will be significant costs associated with the decarbonisation of the bus fleet. Agree a ticketing and fare strategy. So there's an aspiration within our bus service improvement plan that we will remove the premium on multi-operator tickets. We need to understand the competition implications of that and work that through with operators as well. We will be working to secure traffic commission registration powers, which is something that comes along with enhanced partnership responsibilities. And that will give us some further local accountability for service provision and making sure that the objectives within the enhanced partnership met. And then we'll also be working with operators on a further specific deliverable within the bus service improvement plan, which is around coordinated regional bus control centre to ensure we've got strong operational performance across all operators' services. So those are all things which we believe can be delivered through enhanced partnership. We'll be working with operators on plans for those things over the coming months. But, you know, as Pete said, significant work associated with all of those items. Now, we'll be twin tracking that with an assessment of further assessment of franchising. All the things on the previous slide will very much be part of this work too. So that's not sort of abortive work. All of those objectives are things which would need to be considered through a franchising assessment. So the first few bullet points on here are essentially repeating what is on that earlier slide. But as part of the franchising assessment, we'll also need to think about if we were to award contracts to run the network, how would we break up the region? What would the franchising areas look like? How long would contracts be? We need to consider where revenue risk lies. Would that be something that the authority was prepared to take on, or would there be some revenue risk sharing with the franchised operators? We need to think about key contractual terms, KPIs, and also specific activities which the authority would undertake, which activities would operators, franchise holders take, and how would the transitional arrangements work as well to make sure that we have the appropriate staff capacity and capability, both within the authority and within contract operator providers, to make sure that services could be continued to operate through that period. One of the key points that came out of some of our discussions with local authorities during the process was around governance and who actually would let the contracts. What would the governance structure be around setting the network, setting standards? Who would the contracting entity be? What change management processes would be in place? So that's something we would need to consider as well, and also some of the wider risks and mitigations that will be required. For example, pensions. We've assessed that there's still a risk around pensions. not insurmountable risk, but that's an example of where we need to study that in more detail and understand how we could mitigate those things. And a key part of the franchise assessment would also be public consultation. So we need to develop a consultation strategy. So quite significant work within that slide as well. I'm sure you'll be interested in timescales. Again, this is quite high level, but we've got a key date in July this year when the Birmingham City Centre Advanced Quality Partnership Scheme ends. That needs to be incorporated into our existing enhanced partnership scheme, and we'll take that opportunity to update our enhanced partnerships to integrate as much of what is in our bus service improvement plan, so the things on the second slide I showed, as possible. So those negotiations with bus operators will be commencing within the next few weeks, actually. At the same time as that, we'll be starting the full franchising assessment, which, as you've seen from the previous slide, will take a period of time. But we think, by the time we get to summer 2023, we'll be in a position where we can undertake the external audit of that franchising assessment if it's deemed necessary. So we'll have had the revised enhanced partnership in place for a year by that point, so we'll understand how that's performing and take the decision, do we need to continue with this franchising assessment, or is enhanced partnership delivering what we need it to? There's then a requirement for statutory public consultation, which clearly takes time, and not just to undertake the consultation, but then to revise the approach dependent on the outcomes of that consultation. And again, that's another opportunity, a further year down the line, to assess, is that EP delivering, or do we need to take the final decision to undertake franchising? That will be a mayoral decision, and that's likely to be probably around 2025 if the timescales play out as described on that slide. Then, of course, there'll be a mobilisation implementation period. So we're looking at, I suppose, 3 years to get to the point where a franchising authority is in place and contracted operators providing those services. But all through that process, we'll be assessing how well is enhanced partnership delivering, and if it continues to deliver, then there's no need to go through all of the detailed process on here. So hopefully that's given you a good insight as to some of the work we'll be undertaking over the next few weeks, months and years. But initial tasks very much outcome driven, looking at how we can deliver the BSIP through network design, service performance, ticketing simplification, decarbonisation, and then developing processes to achieve those things which can be compatible with enhanced partnership or adapted to enable franchising, and then getting franchising to a point where it could be activated at any point if enhanced partnership fails to deliver.
Chair, could I just come in and offer just a note of caution? Those timescales that Steve laid out there, we've tried to ensure that, given the very fast pace from Friday to today, we could give you, but they are indicative dates purely at this stage, and we will be working through, but hopefully that gave a flavour for the level of intricacy and involvement in terms of the full franchising assessment and the indicative dates that we've got, which will be refined and worked through, and hopefully also gave an overview that enhanced partnership will also require a significant level of work from everybody involved to sort of continue that moving.
Yeah, thanks very much, Pete and Steve. I think that was very helpful. I think, and having that indication of how much work is going to be involved with both those options, I think it's written. Yes, that's quite yes, it's quite a reality check, isn't it? I mean, from my point of view, I'm pleased to hear that it's still a twin track approach, and that that the franchising option is still there, something which is being considered as a realistic possibility. Because I think when I read your the report, the beginning of it, which is actually talking about the current state of the bus network, or the bus market as we must call it, that's really quite alarming, because I think the threats to the difficulty of keeping all the routes going, and the level of subsidy that's going to be required, and the question marks about whether there's going to be continuing funding from the government after March, I think is really quite alarming. And I was very interested to read in, so I'm just going to reference paragraph 2.11 of your report, where you've written, this situation highlights, in quotes, the minimal level of influence and control that the local transport authority has over the current determination of routes and services as we enter a period of time containing the largest potential threat of major changes to bus services since deregulation in 1985. So really, you're talking about desperate times, aren't you? So for me, that's why we need to have the the franchising option still on the table, because we need to preserve those routes that are so essential for our communities, particularly in outlying estates or in more deprived areas. So I think if you could just give members of the committee, Pete, an overview of just how serious things are in terms of maintaining the network at the moment, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think obviously that's been a critical issue all the way through this pandemic, because I suppose none of what we are operating within, whether it be whatever framework of regulation, was ever seemed to be designed for the current situation with the pandemic and emerging out of that. So the challenges we face have been driven by several points, really. I suppose one, given that what we have seen through the pandemic is more, if you like, control, I suppose is the word, move back to central government for how buses will be put into place. So all of those, if you like, commitments for funding to date have been driven by agreements between central government and bus operators, and therefore actually the dialogue therefore is quite strongly going between bus operators and the government. Now, prior to the pandemic, if you like, because you would have assumed a status quo, the challenges might have been that you might have had a small or marginal bus growth or bus reductions, and therefore the local transport authority's responsibility is then to manage the situation that falls out of that. If it's growth, that's great, and you work on more partnership aspirations. If it's a reduction, there might be an implication to your tendered network, but that's a manageable implication. Whereas here, what we are seeing is direct funding going from government to bus operators, but there is no negotiated funding at the moment beyond April the 6th this year. And then the harsh risk around that is that if that funding were to completely disappear on April the 7th, that would risk up to, based on current patronage levels, up to £50 million shortfall in the West Midlands bus network, which would result in massive bus cuts across the region. Now, actually, none of us could foresee a position where the government would probably allow that to happen. So therefore, there are ongoing discussions between bus operators. I myself was called to a discussion on Friday between operators and the government and local transport authority representatives, so we could hear the government talking this through. There are hopes that the Department for Transport will be supported by others in this space, and so I think there's options and opportunities for that funding to extend, and I think none of us could foresee a complete cliff edge. But nonetheless, what that still has is risk, because we don't know how much funding there will be, where it will come from, or how long it will last, and whether the tapering of that will actually go in accordance with the increase in bus patronage across the region, the recovery, if you like, back to base. And it's how those two come together that will, if you like, create the level of risk that we will see in this region, and how we will mitigate it. And of course, the mitigations for that can only be done in certain ways. They are either cuts to the network, therefore because they can't be supported, or additional subsidy, so increases in tenders at this stage. Now, we're working very closely with the bus operators. The bus operators are very clear on this piece of work that we're undertaking, the aspirations for enhanced partnership. They're also very clear on the requirement for the full franchising assessment, and that is part of the evidence-led approach. I think they're probably also very clear that because of COVID, the level of risk associated with enhanced partnerships and partnerships generally has increased, whilst the level of risk associated with franchising has probably in some ways reduced. And that is partly driven by the fact that we have that, if you like, that smaller level of influence / control over what those changes are to the bus networks in the coming months. But we are still working very, very, very closely with the operators to try and ensure that we have as much influence as possible and practical. And we probably all are at the moment at the mercy of sort of deadlines and dates that are being drawn out from government, if you like, short time scales that are being driven up to then see whether funding is forthcoming or not, or to what degree. So hopefully that sets out the risk and some of the key drivers of that as we face them at the moment. But obviously they are having an impact in terms of how we look forward and assess our options. But the bus operators, if the bus operators were here, they would be very keen to point out that in the West Midlands, they have an absolute aspiration to maintain network coverage, to maintain services. And we also need to remember in that space that operators have, if you like, through 2020, whilst they were supported by government, weren't allowed to make a profit. Through 2021, we've seen service deregistrations and reductions. So we wholly anticipate that the particularly our bus operators, or probably no bus operator, will have made a real profit in 2021. I'd be hugely surprised if they had. So I think we've also got to measure that in to how we are working with them through the enhanced partnership, and how we understand the risks associated with any changes to the network in the future. And they do inform us that they are committed to working hard to making an enhanced partnership work for the region. But obviously a lot of those factors we're yet to see the outcomes of.
Great, thanks, Pete. I think that was very useful, just setting up just the gravity of the situation, because I assume it's the same across the country, so that every region will be going to the government, asking, for continuing subsidies really to maintain the current network. I mean, obviously, surely it must be the case with the Commonwealth Games coming that we want, the government will not want us to have, a complete collapse in public transport as we welcome thousands of visitors into the region. So let's, we have to sort of continue to be hopeful there. But I think everyone on the committee would be concerned about the potential loss of, of essential bus services in their wards. I've got, I think, 3 people who wanted to come in. Barbara, you raised your hand briefly, and then it went, then it disappeared again. Do you want to come in?
It's just Pete actually answered the question, because I don't know how on earth we've got into this situation. It just feels like the 11th hour and we're flapping around looking for money. It just seems bizarre, but you have answered that question. So thank you for that, but it's just an awful situation.
Yeah, no.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I share your concern, Barbara. Then I've got Councillor Hare and then Councillor McCarthy again. So Gerda, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. West Midland Combined Authority got 8.9 million for 2022-23 to delivery of the Cessna delivery settlement. How to prioritize the list of schemes to different reasons, forefront of the program, how it will be up to dated and merit the operation. Can Pete answer that, or Stephen?
Councillor Hare, sorry, I don't know if it was others as well, but towards the latter half of your question, the sound was sort of protracting out quite a bit. I couldn't hear the last half of it very well.
I think distorted. I didn't really understand the question, Gerda. Can you possibly put it in the chat? Can you write it down? Because I think a lot of us didn't understand that.
No, I was just asking how to prioritize the list, and then for different reason, and forefront of the program. How it will be
the sustainable city, the city region sustainable transport settlement.
That's right.
How
they prioritize?
Yeah, just hold your horses a minute, because that's a separate item on the agenda, and that's we've got an item on that actually, which is at the end of the agenda. So we'll come back to that unless people want to say something now, because there is an issue about the bus services improvement capital funding, which is not available now separately, and has been, as far as I understand it, brought into the sustainable transport settlement. Pete, over to you.
Doesn't it come into the bus delivery service?
Yeah, I think if I've understood correctly, Councillor, I think this may be associated with the fact that it refers to in the report the CRS preparatory funding settlement, and that is the 8.9 million, of which 1.5 million is being secured to help deliver both the enhanced partnership and the full franchising assessment. So that's where the funding settlement in here is associated with the CRSTS. So this is about the preparatory funding. And through the government advised that any local transport authority working through its bus delivery options should use that funding to support that work, and that's what's been proposed in this report and supported by the Combined Authority Board. If I've understood it correctly, I think that's the point that the councillor was making.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that, and sorry, Gerda, sorry for intervening there and not waiting for Pete to explain in answer to your question. So apologies, both of you, but thanks for clarifying that. Martin, your question.
Right, it's just appear on the screen. Yeah, there, interesting report. It covers potentially severe problems and opportunities over both near and far, doesn't it, in time terms? First question in that case is, I don't see anything mentioned on new technology partnership working on localised autonomous collection services or short distance bus services, which I think are being considered. And well, I'll ask that one first.
Okay, that's basically the works that are going on there around autonomous, also being covered, I think, under the CRSTS area of works, but through the innovation. Transport innovation funds that Transport for West Midlands have been working with others on. There are some pilot projects being looked at. That probably is deemed to be, in terms of wider rollout and wider rollout, beyond the timescales of this immediate report and work that we're looking at. But absolutely, those things are being considered in tandem, and that work is ongoing. And there are other colleagues on the call as well who have been working quite hard on those projects. And at the moment, there are some further phases looking towards awarding some of those initial schemes for those autonomous pilots within the region, which are hugely exciting, but probably won't necessarily deliver the large scale on-road outcomes that we are needing in terms of the timescales, looking at the immediate problems on the wider bus network, Councillor.
This could actually be quite a useful item to come back to the board in the future. It'll give us some hope for that the net zero thing is actually going to go in the way that we want it to, which we're perilously short of these days with such an ambitious target. Now, coming to the second question, we talked about location of bus depots and things like that in the report. And my question is the location of Tyseley Power Park being considered, considering that there's a fairly major hydrogen generation facility integrated into that plant, which is intended for commercial vehicle use?
I think the answer is yes, but I'll ask Steve if he'll come in on that one, because I think we are working through that one as well.
Yeah, so in terms of the capacity available for fueling hydrogen buses at Tyseley, it's relatively low. So the initial trials that are undertaken, it's my understanding that the 20 buses that are being delivered through that scheme is pretty much the capacity of hydrogen that would be available. So there is some additional capacity there for further buses and further vehicles, but probably not almost certainly not enough to do things on the scale that we need to. So if you think about the fact there's over 2,000 buses operating in the West Midlands, that's going to need a number of sites across the region. So we'll be working with the different local authorities to identify what the best strategy is for that, as well as bus operators too, of course.
Yeah, the website for that Tyseley Power area mentions a link up with the Cross City line and enable us to upspec diesel engines for transport. The other part of it is that these plants are step and repeat, double up and treble up. And if we push for it, we have an opportunity to have a link up in the transport system, because we don't really want to be having a lot of commercial vehicles with hydrogen cylinders travelling about, clogging our roads, if we can do it in a more thought out way.
Yeah, we're developing a strategy actually over the next next few months or year or so to determine how we're going to meet our 2030 ambition for decarbonising the network. Hydrogen will be part of that, electric will be part of that, and there may be other fuels to consider as part of that as well. So different fuels suitable for different use cases. So we'll be working out how we best approach that over the next few months.
Okay, perhaps again, fruitful area for a follow-up report at some time in the future distant work plan of this board.
Yeah, thanks. Good questions, Martin. And I think the hydrogen bus pilot in Birmingham is really exciting, and the buses I think operating on the 51 route. And I think at the board meeting on Friday, I noticed that Councillor Order saying that the aspiration is for Birmingham, in particular, to become a centre of hydrogen technologies. And there's that whole Tyseley area. I think that is part of the whole sort of development and regeneration strategy. So yes, a topic that we should definitely come back to.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions for Pete and Steve at this stage? Okay, I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I'd like to thank you both for coming and talking again to the Scrutiny Committee about this, after having had the board item on Friday. So you're busy people at the moment, and you've got a massive work agenda in front of you, is looking at both those options. And yes, we will have to remain hopeful for some ongoing subsidy after April the 6th. So let's keep our fingers crossed. Thanks very much. And yes, look forward to talking with you about this as it progresses over the next years. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Let's move on then in our agenda. And we've now got Matt Lewis joining us to talk about developments in the SWIFT systems for ticketing. Matt, you've sent us a presentation, so Tim, we're going to talk to that and then take questions from members.
Yeah, thanks guys. Let me just bring my screen up. Just one sec. Here we go. Can you see this, guys?
Yes, it's quite
Swift.
Yeah, it's quite small, but yes,
it's
that's
a bit
fine.
small.
It's in the document pack as well, isn't it? So we can blow it for our own use.
Correct, Martin. It's in the PDF document that Lindsay sent us for the pack of papers. I noticed it's about a 235 pack of pages in our document pack. So it's quite a daunting one to look through over the weekend. But anyway, press on, Matt.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you guys for taking the time to let me give you an overview of what's going on with Swift. So just to start at where Swift is now before I move on to the things we've done recently and the things we're going to do. So it is the largest, most comprehensive smart card scheme in the UK outside of London by quite a long way. I think if you added Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, Sheffield, etc. together, there'd be less journeys than ours. So we've got a substantial scheme. We've got about 1 million registered users, but it's regularly used by about 250,000 people. And they were making more than 60 million journeys a year before COVID. And that was growing year on year. So we had a growing scheme. Actually, COVID, whilst journeys are down, because journeys are down overall, there's been quite a shift to Swift as people move to take a contactless means of payment rather than cash because of some of the health concerns associated with, COVID being passed through cash. And prior to COVID, 1 in 4 public transport journeys were on Swift. That's now about 1 in 3. And you can see from the graph there, whereas bus patronage recovery in October was at about 75%, Swift recovery was almost at 100%. So as bus patronage recovers back to normal levels, Swift will go beyond where it was before COVID. The other thing to state is that our customers really like Swift. So latest customer satisfaction surveys show that 88% of customers are either satisfied or very satisfied. And actually, if you break that down into age categories, young people really like this. So 16 to 24-year-olds satisfaction's at 92%. And that there is logic behind that. We put lots of effort into the 16 to 18 scheme, products specifically for children, etc. So lots of work happened to get that score. But ultimately, we've got a great platform, but recognise that we need to continuously improve, and that's where our new work comes out of. So what have we delivered to date? Biggest one for us is Swift Go, which is our capping solution. So in London, they've got the Oyster card where you tap around and it caps you at the end of the day. We've now delivered that into the West Midlands. So you've got bus and tram, tap around all day and you'll get charged the best fare. It understands all the complexities. So whether you're traveling the peak and off peak, a certain zone. So if all you did was travel in the Walsall low fare zone, you get the low fare cap, etc. The caps work across 1 day, 3 day and 1 week. So perfect for those returning to hybrid working. So when our office opens again, you know, I'll be in 1 week, 2 days, another week, 3 days, and that will change. So having the flexibility of being charged the best price without, you know, me knowing in advance what my work pattern is going to be fantastic. The other thing to note here is in London, you have a 1 day and a 1 week cap. So in that context, we're ahead of them in that we have the 3 day cap, which we think is going to be really important. Launched in July, it's been quite frustrating actually, because it's been difficult to really push the message out there when we're not asking people to be on public transport. And when it was about the right time we went back down into a sort of mini lockdown. So we've got a reasonable marketing budget to promote this, and we're going to really push that now, as we open up a bit more. But even without sort of significant marketing, we've had 30,000 journeys already. We're sure this will be a success. Still some work to do. So we're doing work to bring the children's solution to this, and to also expand the top-up network. So you can get this from the 1,000 pay zone outlets that we have through Swift. The other issue that's frustrated us for a long time in terms of Swift is the rollout onto the rail network, which is always more difficult. We have less control. But we've now set up a board with Department for Transport, Rail Delivery Group, West Midlands Trains, that's looking how we can deliver this Swift Go solution onto the train as well. And once we've done that, we'll have a scheme that rivals what's there in London, and actually will be a little bit better in that it's more flexible in terms of the caps that it offers. So that's a huge piece of work, should make a real difference as people return to work. Another scheme that we've worked on is the Clean Air Zone. So in the Birmingham's Clean Air Zone, if you decide to scrap your car, they give you a code, you enter that into your Swift account, and it generates £2,000 worth of Swift credit. You can use the credit to pay for anything within the Swift app. I'll come on to the Swift app in a minute, but so that's bus tickets, train, tram tickets, but also bike hire is part of that, and more modes will come shortly. Not many people have taken it up at the moment, 12 users, although that's £24,000 of revenue. The scheme sort of will accelerate as you move into next year, as some of the sort of the exemptions come off. So we're expecting usage to be significantly more than that. Even so, this was a bigger project than the Birmingham Clean Air Zone. So ultimately what this has done, it's brought in this redeemer code function into the Swift solution so that we can use it for rewards and incentives. And actually we've got agreement from NX 2 weeks ago that they are going to use our function to target people that were traveling before COVID. So they were traveling before COVID, they're no longer traveling. We know that from our Swift data. National Express are going to provide discounts to those people to encourage them back onto public transport. So already we're getting wider benefit out of this redeemer code function that should help, again, encourage people to come back. So moving on. So this is another huge piece of work that we've rolled out last year, 2021, which is the Swift app. So prior to this, we had about 4 different apps, one that was doing journey planning, one that had real-time information, sort of built iteratively over time. With our strategy in 2019, we decided we need to bring together everything into one app for the user. And this is where we've got to. So launched in June, it's got journey planning, ticket finding, you can purchase any ticket, real-time information is there. So if you click on bus, it will bring up a map. Click on the nearest bus stop to you, it will tell you in real time when that bus is due. Does the same for tram and train. Also has account management. And this is our first step towards mobility as a service, which is the concept of bringing all mobility together so that you no longer need your own private car ultimately. So that's the sort of aim of this sort of solution. This is our first step. I'll show you what we're doing to move beyond this. Hugely popular already. So again, very little marketing's gone into this, but we've had 25,000 downloads people are already reliant on it, and it's available on the App Store or through Google Play. So I do recommend you have a play if you get a chance to download it. Part of that is integrating West Midlands Cycle Hire. So these are live screens from our app on the right hand side. So if you click on Cycle Hire, it brings up a map where all the docks are. If you click on a dock in real time, it shows you how many bikes are in the dock, so that you know before you get there whether there's a bike spare or not. At the moment, you then click through if you've got some price information, and your data goes into Beryl, so that you don't have to sort of re-registration is much easier, but you pay in the Beryl app at the moment. The next steps for us is to bring booking and payment into the Swift app, and that's something that I'll move on to, that we're working on as I go into the next section. But what we have done, which again is a really neat feature, is we've sort of replicated PayPal. So you can pay with Swift through other people's apps. So if you go into the Beryl app to hire a bike, one of the options you'll get is to pay with Swift. And therefore, the £2,000 credits you had from Birmingham, for example, you can use that to pay for your bike rather than your own money, or you can use the account, the bank card you've got registered with your Swift account to use it, or a top up. So making that much easier for everyone, and we'll be able to roll that out into demand responsive transport apps. Anyone who's got a mobility app can have the pay with Swift function, which is going to be a big feature of the future of Swift. Parking. This is our so we see this as a sort of opportunity to have the biggest behaviour change. So we know that we've got loads of information about 250,000 people that use public transport regularly, but actually they're already using public transport. It's information about other users we need. So if you park your car every day, if we know about you, we can really encourage you to change your behaviour. So that was the logic as to why we moved into the car parking space. Swift parking app was launched in August. We've got just under 5,000 registered users already. We've got all of the car parks in Coventry and Dudley. We'll be coming for the other areas in the coming weeks, so really keen to sign up everyone else onto this. We've got vending machines as well at Bromsgrove and Longbridge, so you can use your Swift pay as you go to pay for your parking at the vending machine. The sort of most innovative solution we've delivered over 2021 is the integration of automatic number plate recognition. So if you put your number plate against your Swift account, you drive into Longbridge Park and Ride, park your car, get on the train, don't worry about it, payments automatic. So drive in, drive out, we get you in and out times, and we can therefore charge you automatically. And that's live today. So no one else has done that, connected a number plate with a smart card solution. So we're really pleased of doing that, and we're sure there are advantages elsewhere as we roll that out further. As I said, National Express is starting to exploit this, which is great. So they've agreed that all of our car park users, or those that are parking regularly and therefore aren't public transport users, National Express are going to offer them a significant discount to encourage them to use public transport. Hence why I'm really keen to get this rolled out into the areas where it isn't, so that your residents can start to benefit from these offers that are aimed at nudging people to travel more sustainably. So that's just the things we've done. These are the things we're working on. As I mentioned, it's been a huge frustration for us, but there's a big hole with Swift and the rail network. At the moment, there are 6 stations that have hardware, and we've done the best we can with that. So we've got something like 36,000 regular users of the rail network with Swift, but they're all direct debit customers, because it's those that are going through those stations that are tapping in, tapping out. We want to roll this out to everyone else. West Midlands Trains are committed to delivering the hardware across that entire map. You can see on the right hand side, they've purchased the hardware. They're going through the sort of installation of that now. They're expected to do that by the end of this calendar year. Automatically that will lead to exponential growth in Swift use on the rail network. Once you can buy a single, a return, a week's ticket, etc. through Swift, lots of people will. The interesting thing of this, as I mentioned, is that obviously that map is much larger than the 7 local authority areas of the West Midlands. So Swift will be rolled out to Shrewsbury, Hereford, Northampton, Leamington, Tamworth, all of those areas. And we're using that as an opportunity to roll out all of Swift more widely. So already Swift is valid in Redditch on the buses. it's valid in Cannock on the buses, it's actually valid in Hereford on the buses. So we're going to use this as an opportunity to capture that entire journey to work area and also bring in some more revenue to help cover some of our costs. So a real good platform there to move on. Big projects on the tram network. So at the moment, you get on the tram to get your ticket, and actually that can be really difficult with some of the busy stations. I don't know if you've been on there at Grand Central. You know, a whole host of people get on, some of them only travelling a few stops, and the conductor doesn't actually get round to collect the fare. So quite a bit of revenue is lost from that. So what we're doing is moving to an off-tram ticketing solution where there'll be platform validators and ticket vending machines at every stop. So you tap on at the validator before you get on, and you tap off when you get off, sorry. And again, through the capping engine we have, you get the best fare. And this will work with Swift, including Swift Go, contactless payments, so you'll be able to use your bank card, and also barcodes. So even barcodes will enable a best value cap on that. The procurement exercise has been complete, other than the final award, which we're just signing off now. Delivery is expected early 2023. We're actually putting on hold some of the rollout just to make sure there's no disruption for the Commonwealth Games, but confident that we'll have everything in place for early 2023. It brings significant benefits. Quite easy to see the customer benefits, but also significant efficiencies for West Midlands Metro. So it's a hugely important project, and it's a puzzle. It's a piece within the wider jigsaw. So it will do everything bus is doing. It will then move on to do everything train is doing once we get train on site as well. So as I said, mobility as a service is this concept that you bring all modes of transport together, make it really easy for customers to use it. So bus, train, tram, bike, taxi, car hire, e-scooters, demand responsive transport. You make it really easy for customers to access it, and then they don't need a car, or they don't need a second car. And through that, you encourage behaviour change. So we're doing a big piece of work to make Swift compatible to plug into what will be a world-class new app. And ultimately what that means is access to our customer management system, access to our payment gateways, access to our capping and rules engine. So a new provider will just be able to plug and play into that and automatically overnight offer a world-class mobility as a service solution. So again, lots of work that's going on there that will make a huge difference. And I think we'll be sort of earmarked as one of the best in the world at this once we pull this off, which would be fantastic. This is our biggest issue. And again, from the report that was submitted on Friday to the Combined Authority, we're happy to see that we'll be solving this. So contactless payment, you use the card you already have in your pocket. So you've got your bank card that the bank issued, it's already in your pocket. So you don't have to have the faff of applying for anything or find a shop to get it or wait for it to be delivered. You just use your bank card. Every bus operator in the West Midlands now has the ability to take your bank card as payment. The tram operator does as well. The hardware that West Midlands Trains is rolling out will be compatible with bank card payment too. So that's great, and we're therefore much further ahead than anyone other than London in that regard. But there's an issue in this area that affects everyone, where data is not transferred between different manufacturers, different payment service providers. So if today you got on the National Express bus, you got on a Diamond bus, and then back on a National Express bus, you will definitely be overcharged. You will definitely be overcharged. So what should be the best solution in the West Midlands, i.e. using that card you've already got, can be the worst. And therefore take up isn't as high as it could be. You know, it falls well short of what we need it to be. We've done a lot of work on this over the last 2 years to design a solution to it. We've tested it with MasterCard, Visa, payment service providers, ticketing manufacturers. Everyone agrees it's the right solution. Before the crusts, the City Regions funding bid, we've retested it, so that again, you know, it's been 2 years since the initial design. We've retested it, we've updated the commercial case, we've put together the procurement, so we're ready to go. And the BCR, I mean, the benefits of this are huge. BCR of 7.08. So we're now in a position. We've got our agreement on Friday that we'll be looking to procure this solution so that you will be able to use your card across operators and get the best value caps I talked about when I talked about Swift Go. So use Diamond Bus, use National Express, use the train, use the tram, and you get the best fare that can apply. And you're doing that using your bank card. Once we've done that, That will be the final piece in the jigsaw, and then we'll dislodge London in terms of having the best ticketing solution in the UK, and we'll be a beacon for the rest of the world. Do you see what I mean? Some of the things we're doing, which I'll come on to show you, is well beyond where even London are thinking. So this is the Transport for London rights. This is what everyone compares us to. So they launched Oyster in 2003. They then moved on to contactless payment in 2012, and they sort of finished their launch around about 2017. We were almost 10 years later than them in coming into this space, and we've done lots of iterative developments. A lot of our challenge has been around funding, which I'll come on to. They've spent £1.2 billion on this. You know, that's nowhere near. We have had a fraction of that to spend. Where there's sort of been a level playing field, we've tended to be ahead. So if you look at 2015, we rolled out online top-ups for Swift. It took them till 2017 to do that. So where the playing field's level, we sort of seem to be ahead of them, but where it isn't in terms of funding and regulatory control, it's taken us a little bit longer. But final slide. So this is a true comparison of us and them. So yeah, we're at about 24 million since 2012. They're at 1.2 billion, so can't compete on that regard. The green is where we're better. So mobile top-ups directly to your card, yes, they don't do that. Account-based ticketing so that you can include a number plate as well as a card, they don't do that. Mobility credits, I won't go through all of this, but in all of these cases, we're ahead of them. We're now doing capping, although it's not on train, so we are behind them, but we've got a funded plan to work through that. We're now doing contactless payment, but again, it's not integrated, but we've got a funded plan to do that. So once we've delivered these next two big items, we'll be head and shoulders above them. So hugely proud of the work that everyone's done on this. So I'll come back over to you.
Thanks very much, Matt. And I think you and your colleagues should be justifiably proud of that, because I think a real innovation and something world leading coming out of our region. And I've heard you talk about this 2 or 3 times now over the last few weeks, and it's it's inspirational stuff. And the sort of things like what you've done on the parking with the linking to number plate recognition, again, something that's genuinely an innovation, and the advancement on the contactless payment with bank card. I think that will actually be transformational for a lot of people. But the whole thrust of what you've presented us this morning is making it much easier for people to cross modes on transport and just find all the ticketing information and the purchasing much more easily. So really great stuff. Just open it up now to questions from colleagues, members of the committee. This is your chance to question Matt about the recent developments. Barbara.
Thank you, Chair. Just really to echo what you've said, sounds absolutely brilliant. Everything all connected up. I mean, that is such a good service. So well done, Matthew and your team. Thank you. Thanks.
I'm not seeing any more hands at the moment. So actually, no, just as I say that, I'm seeing Martin. I mean, just before Martin comes in, I wanted to say that the one thing that's perhaps a slight disappointment for me is the level of take up of the mobility credits in Birmingham, linked to the clean air zone. And I wonder whether Matt, you've got any ideas about how to promote that further and to get more people signed up. I'm sure it's a consequence of the whole pandemic situation and people's concerns about using public transport, but I would be interested in your thoughts there. But Martin, over to you.
Right, yeah, thank you for an easy to access app. While you were talking, I loaded it up and tested it quickly. I noticed that if I come into Summer Lane, for instance, I would get the train and walk over to Summer Lane, and it would cost me as an anytime short day return £6.10. On your system, the best I could get was £9.70, because it doesn't do those limited time tickets.
Are you talking about rail tickets there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I was claiming expenses for this trip, I'd probably get bounced for spending too much money.
Getting some live feedback there.
Yeah, no, that again, like I say,
to look at in the future, but
it's a huge frustration to us where we are with rail ticketing. And again, some of this is the regulatory. An organisation is given a franchise for a number of years, and if it's not set out at the start, it's quite difficult to change. We do now have a funded programme that will change all of that. So all of rail tickets will come into Swift and you'll be able to purchase all of them. In the meantime, you're right, if you're using rail only, there are better means, which is unfortunate to have to say, but that's going to change.
Okay, just would tend to put someone off from using the system because people say, oh, is it going to cost me the same? Firstly, they'll look to see if it's going to cost them less being people, but then they're going to find out it doesn't. But I say, if you've got an answer to that, let's get it in place as soon as possible because it's a nice system.
Absolutely.
Fantastic, and thanks, thanks Martin for downloading the app and giving the immediate feedback on that. And yes, let's hope that we can get the integration of the rail services as soon as possible, because through the rest of the presentation we learned about how most of the other modes, including cycling and parking, are now integrated into Swift, which is absolutely fantastic. Any more questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any more raised hands at the moment, and I think that that's a sign, Matt, of how comprehensive the presentation was, but just how impressive the work that you've done with your team over the last few years has been. And it's interesting to see the comparison with London, because the scale of money that's been available to TfL is just absolutely dwarfs what you've had in this region, but and just makes the achievements with Swift, all the more impressive, really. So thank you very much. And yes, I think we'll all look forward to making use of the Swift app and the new TFWM app. And yes, look forward to hearing more about this in the future. So thank you very much for that great presentation.
Thank you.
Excellent. Now moving back to the agenda. So I'm just toggling between screens here. Okay, I can see David's popped up on the screen, which is a reminder that we're now onto an update on the West Midlands LTP, the draft core strategy, which again, it was discussed by the CA board on Friday, but we've got David here to just brief us on what was discussed and decided by the board on Friday and what the next steps are. And Alex is here as well. So hello, both of you, and yes, do carry on.
Good morning, Councillor Clements. Good morning, committee. Yeah, as Councillor Clements just said, we took a report on the draft LTP core strategy, local transport plan core strategy, to board on Friday, and they approved us moving forward with the engagement on that draft core strategy. We'll come on to that. Alex is just going to do the first part of the presentation to sort of introduce the concepts, principles and approaches to how we're approaching the new local transport plan, recognising that actually the challenges that we've got are quite significant and they require a different approach to one that we might have taken before. And we'll go through that in the plan, and I'll come back in just to sort of wrap up around how we're approaching the engagement. So I'm going to hand over to Alex.
Brilliant. Thank you, David and Chair. So just to a bit of background about what we're doing and why and how we've got on with that green paper engagement. So just recapping on some of the basics that we talked about last time, I'll just go over. So reminding you that the Combined Authority is the local transport authority for the area covered by the 7 Met districts, and we have the statutory duty to produce and review a local transport plan for the area, which is what we're doing. And then along with the local authorities, we then have duties to execute that plan using our various functions. And that LTP must set out policies to promote safe, integrated, efficient and economic transport to, from and within the area, so transport everywhere. And as well as policies, the plans to implement those policies, so the nitty gritty, what we're doing on the street to make the strategy happen. And it can do that over a number of documents, which we'll come back to later. Some of the value of the LTP, just to remind you as well, lies in the weights assigned to it in public policy decision making on a range of matters. So, for example, locally, it's got a role in supporting local authorities to make decisions relating to their planning functions, applications they get and things like that. But also it's a key document that government will consider in decisions it's making on funding that it provides to us to support local action. And although the CA is ultimately accountable for producing and reviewing the LTP, it's absolutely being developed in partnership with a range of stakeholders, not least the 7 constituent authorities who are traffic and highway authorities for the area, as well as planning authorities, and it's being shaped through engagement with the public. So our green paper then, Reimagine Transport in the West Midlands, that was published back in July to aid conversations with the public over the future of the LTP. And we did that across a number of channels with a range of stakeholder groups. So that's included traditional kind of open surveys for the general public and business to respond to, as well as stakeholder sessions we've had with the transport sector and some deep deliberative engagement we have undertaken with our online community. It's worth drawing attention in particular to the high level of responses we've had from the general public to our traditional survey. So we got over 600 full responses from our citizens and even more partial responses. So the consultation has attracted more response than we understand has previously been received on actual draft LTPs. This was just a discussion paper, a green paper. It's not actually our new draft LTP. So the public, you know, from that engagement, we've kind of learned that the public are more engaged with the issues than they perhaps previously have been. On the other side of things, though, unfortunately, we have had less success in attracting responses from businesses across the region, and we have, as we went through the engagement, we took a number of actions to address that. One of the things we did was to organise an in-person engagement event, which was supported by the Chambers of Commerce in Atkins with business. As we go forward, now that we're going to be consulting on a draft strategy, core strategy, we will be ensuring business engagement is strengthened to better understand those perspectives as we go on. So just to go through a little bit of that that feedback we got through the public, so we got really rich feedback, and some of that is set out in the report that was appended to the CA board report on this, on the draft strategy. But a few key messages we felt coming through strongly were things like, so there was support for the Motors for Change, which were basically our aims, which is set out in the green paper, with particular support for tackling the climate emergency and addressing transport inequity. Most now feel that levels of traffic on local roads was a problem, and that's a key barrier preventing people from choosing to walk and cycle, which is something that they feel is really important to enable people to do more of, to better support and improve quality of life. There's a clear sense that the current approach is not delivering sufficient progress across the region, that there's issues that we cannot build our way out of or fix by relying on technology. And in particular, whilst the shift to better ways of powering vehicles with low emission technology is seen as important, it was also seen as insufficient to address broader issues. So it's felt that our approach should place greater emphasis on using existing fixed infrastructure better. And then whatever the future is to look like, the majority agree that although car use will continue to be important, its use should reduce. And though many understand that they individually should be, you know, in theory, reducing their car use, that's something that's much easier said than done, because they lack control over those environmental factors that mean they feel like they depend on their cars and that the alternatives are not good enough. Finally, we had widespread acknowledgement that if significant behaviour change were to be achieved, it will require the discouragement of car use by demand management, or more crudely, sticks. And actually, there's also an expectation amongst the public that local and national government would progress these kinds of actions within the next 5 years. And that was contrasted with scepticism, though, on you know, as to whether local and national government would progress those amidst transport sector stakeholders. The question of whether such measures should be used and how is more complex one, and there was a lack of consensus on what would make these measures acceptable, even understanding that they might be necessary. So we had, you know, from the work that we've done, we had a Leaders Transport Summit on the 24th of September to discuss this, which all of the leaders of the constituent authorities were invited. And at that session, you know, a few key reflections here on the screen. The leaders acknowledging that being risk averse would be an inherently risky strategy. So there was definitely a need to change the approach to ensure our aims are being more effectively delivered. And in particular, the case and imperative for demand management was recognised. What's more, it was recognised that government has in effect agreed with this, but has not committed itself to using national policy levers to manage demand. So instead, it's expecting local authorities to lead on implementation of these measures and is using its control over our funding to influence this. And we've seen this this has started to happen in the way that government's focused city regional sustainable transport settlement funding on measures that deliver road space reallocation and quantifiable carbon reductions. So whilst this is all kind of realised and acknowledged, the problem we've got is it doesn't address very real and very valid concerns about the the democratic deliverability of these measures, with that lack of consensus of how to progress with the public, and more public with the work's going to be required to change that. And if we're going to make progress, the public is going to have to relate to these plans. They're going to have to resonate with the public, and at the core of that is ensuring it's really clear that this is a just transition where nobody is being left behind. So that's a recap of the kind of feedback that we were getting on the green paper, and I'll just run through where we now sit in terms of some of those key messages that have developed in the draft core strategy as we've moved forward. So on screen here is a bit around how we're articulating what we envision travel might look like in the future. So as I said, really clear with the public that they think whatever the next 20 years looks like, private vehicles are going to continue to be important, but we should be using our cars less, and that means accessing what we need differently instead. And the West Midlands should be a place where everyone can thrive fundamentally without having to drive and own a car. So on that basis, we've developed here what we see as a vision for a well-connected 45-minute region of 15-minute neighbourhoods where people can travel to access what they need through a mix of walk, wheel and ride modes. So these are some new concepts coming through in the draft strategy. So here, walking and wheeling covers modes that are already well recognised, like walking, cycling, using a wheelchair or mobility scooter, as well as some of those new modes that we've been begun to trial. For example, what we call micromobility often, so things like e-scooters and e-bikes. And ride modes are all those public transport modes we're very familiar with, as well as taxi type services and newer concepts like demand responsive transport that we've also been trialing in the West Midlands. And the idea behind this vision is that wherever, whether you're in your local neighbourhood, if you're out in your local town or city centre, or you're on site at a business or industrial park, you'll have safe and convenient options to walk and wheel to navigate those places. And then it also means that you'll be able to travel beyond those local places, between the neighbourhoods and centres of our region, with affordable, reliable and efficient ride modes. So that system, walk, wheel and ride modes, is also to be supplemented by shared mobility services. So these are things like car and van clubs, so that you don't have to own an expensive vehicle, or bike and scooter hire schemes to use in places where perhaps you couldn't bring your own bike or scooter. So for example, if you've caught the bus or the train into your local town or city centre and it wasn't practical for you to bring your bike or scooter on board with you. And all of this to be connected by physical mobility hubs and virtual mobility as a service. And mobility as a service I won't go into, Matt has covered that off, but mobility hubs really represented an evolution of public transport interchanges into places where you can conveniently access a broader range of transport services. So as well as catching a bus, you might also be able to access a car or van club, hire an e-scooter, charge your electric vehicle, or maybe make use of something like a parcel drop-off and pickup point. So that's a little bit about how we're envisioning, what are we working towards in terms of a system that might work for the West Midlands. But I'm just also going to take a bit of time to talk through the core logic that's set out in the draft strategy. So that tells a story of how our actions are leading into the impacts that we're seeking to make. So just starting with our aims then, hopefully you'll be familiar with this. We've retained the 5 motives for change for the basis for the social, economic, environmental impacts we're seeking to make. So this is really, in essence, the big issues we want to address to deliver inclusive growth in our region. And there was widespread support for those through engagement. But if we're going to deliver those impacts, then we're going to need the transport system to change. And there's 3 principal changes we need to focus on here. Are we improving accessibility? Are we reducing traffic? And are we electrifying transport? So are we phasing out the use of internal combustion engines? That system change relies on the cumulative effects of behavioural changes made by individuals and businesses, and that again is then described by our avoid, shift and improve framework you can see on screen. So avoiding travel, fundamentally shifting where and how we travel, and improving the vehicles we use. And those behavioural changes aren't going to happen though unless people's experiences and perceptions of transport choices differ from today. So we need to think carefully about, on screen, all those factors that go into those individual assessments of where and how people are going to access what they need. And then finally, and kind of crucially, really, we come to the actions of local partners that we take in, in how we govern and invest in the transport system that's going to change those experiences and perceptions of our citizens. So we've set this out in 6 big moves covering different aspects of how we can intervene in the transport system. And this includes things like actions to ensure new developments are accessible, to ensure that streets are safe places to walk and wheel, providing better public transport and shared mobility services, improving how we prioritise movements on our highways, ensuring the infrastructure is well maintained to give us a better resilient network, and actions to most effectively deliver behaviour change. So this chain of logic that we've set out in the draft strategy should really help us ensure that we're progressing the right actions, having the right kinds of impacts, and helping us strengthen the case for doing so. Finally, then I'll just touch on how the core strategy sets out the approach to delivering this action could change. So the core strategy has been really clear that for our new local transport plan to be effective in reducing car use and improving access by other modes, it must include simultaneous actions to invest in better provision for alternatives to our cars, as well as managing demand by discouraging the behaviours we want to do less of, such as using our cars. Now, when conversations are had on managing demand, they very often quickly turn to needing viable alternatives first and to use a carrot-led approach to achieve this. But it's really critically important to understand that managing demand actually is integral to improving those alternatives. So where we want an effective strategy to prioritise cycling and public transport, that is going to require the reallocation of space from other modes. And an effective strategy to make it safe to walk and cycle can't only rely on that segregated infrastructure and main corridors, because that won't address the barriers on tight local streets, where running is occurring and you've got on-street parking problems. So in those spaces, making those environments safer requires a reduction in traffic and management of parking. Now, what the future is going to look like then starts to begin to depend on difficult decisions that have to be made across the region. But we understand that our region, it's not homogeneous. It's a region of very diverse places, and what works in one place isn't going to work in another. So that's why we're going to be working with local partners and communities to better understand what specific options best address local issues through 4 area strategies that are going to cover our region. That's Black Country, Birmingham, Coventry, and Solihull. And we'll also be ensuring that these area strategies are built on public support for action as well, but being clear with the public what the implications of some of these difficult policy choices are either way. But local decisions alone aren't going to be the only thing that affect what our future will look like. And there is a certain amount of progress we can make at the local level. So where we're making a street quieter, we can make it safer to walk, cycle in a neighbourhood. And where we're reallocating priority and space in busy junctions and roads, we can speed up public transport, make it more reliable. But broader national action is going to be required to manage demand to meet the level of and pace of behaviour change to meet our local and national carbon targets. So an example of that kind of national action would be the introduction of national road user pricing to manage demand and address the loss of fuel duty we're facing as we switch away from petrol and diesel vehicles. And with decarbonisation in mind, we just need to remember that it's difficult policy choices in the next few years, which are going to be particularly critical for determining whether we meet local ambitions and national legal targets to decarbonise. And just to give you a scale, an idea of the scale of the change that we're talking about, we've estimated, as well as accelerating the shift to zero emission vehicles, meeting those national carbon targets is going to require a reduction in car mileage of 10% by 2031. And to meet our local West Midlands 2041 targets, that would need to be 35% lower in 2031. So that's not those reductions by the net zero date. That is within the next decade. So implementation and plans that are going to deliver that kind of change are a far cry from local transport plans across the country, which have tended to focus on the very long term. So I'll hand back then to David to just cover what next steps in terms of how we're going to consult and develop other components of the LTP.
Thanks, Alex. So we're going to kick off the engagement from the end of January and run it for a minimum of 8 weeks. And we'll be doing quite a broad range of engagement across key players, both in terms of yourselves and local authorities as politicians, a range of statutory consultees. We'll be talking to the businesses and wider organisations, as well as sort of specialist interest groups as well. And of course, we'll be reaching out far and wide to get the public to sort of engage and respond. And we'll be using a range of channels, including sort of online stakeholder events, digital media, and doing various adverts. So we'll be making sure that as far as possible, people are aware that we're engaging and consulting on the LTP at this time. And what we're trying to do, both in the core strategy and through the engagement that we're doing, is make this relatable to people and the places that people experience in the West Midlands. So the core strategy itself includes a number of personas and vignettes that sort of describe people's experiences in different places, both in terms of what we call a conventional scenario where we carry on as we've been doing, and also then we start to take some of the more difficult decisions to generate the change and the behaviour change that we need to see. And we're also doing this through a range of kind of supporting videos that will go out alongside the LTP, which will help tell the story and help tell people's stories and get people hopefully really to sort of relate and resonate to the kind of narrative that we're trying to get across. I think it's also important just to reflect on the fact this LTP is going to be different to those that have come before, because whilst we're consulting on this core strategy now, that sets out the kind of overarching principles and approach and the policy toolkit that we want to use to help us generate those behaviour changes Alex explained, but we need to translate that through into the different areas of the West Midlands. So what we're also going to do is develop 4 area strategies that will complement things like the Birmingham Transport Plan and other strategies that already exist or are in development. And it will translate the LTP down into those local areas, because we know that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution across the region. In parallel, what we're also going to do is develop up the detail around those 6 big moves that are set out in the core strategy, and this will be done in parallel and in tandem with what we're doing around the area strategy, so that they hang together as a coherent set of a policy framework. And of course, we're going to be working very closely with the local authorities in doing that piece of work. So in terms of timescales, we're already kicking off the work around the big moves and the area strategies, and we anticipate coming back to CA board with a final core strategy, taking on board the comments from the engagement in the summer. And then subsequently, subject to approval at that CA board, then go out and consult on the area strategies and the more detailed big moves later in the year. So there's a quick overview of where we've got to and the approach in the LTP, and we'll try to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, David and Alex. Yes, very good presentation. Some momentous issues there, and I think it's very interesting that from the consultation responses that you've had so far, almost the public is more up for some of the difficult decisions than we are collectively as politicians. And it was quite interesting, I think, to watch the board discussion on Friday, because they did get into a discussion of the sticks and carrots and focusing on the sticks. So there's some literalist approaches to that, but I think we are genuinely now into a situation where we've got to think about how we make it less convenient for people to drive around the region, because we're never going to meet the decarbonisation targets or address congestion problems if we continue to drive and have the same number of car journeys, particularly short car journeys carried out by one person in a vehicle. And I think it's really a political challenge for all of us now, whether we're prepared to go forward and actually continue selling this message to residents. And so, as I say, it's very, very sobering then to have heard from Matt that for the mobility credits in Birmingham connected with the clean air zone, we've had only 12 people coming forward for those, because on the face of it, that seems like quite a good offer. But I think we've got to press on with what we're doing and actually look at how we make those different choices about mobility easy for our residents. I can see that Martin wants to ask a question. Go ahead, Martin.
Right. How are you going to address the issue of trust? This is an issue most keenly felt by people at the lower income area in many of our areas, that they commit to a tenancy, maybe give up their car because they have a good service that took to their local shopping centre. And last August, just taken away, no consultation. So how do you get people to trust the public transport system when that can happen anywhere in the system?
I think that's a very interesting question. I think as we go forward, we've got to think carefully about how we kind of make sure that we have all the right things in place, including the sort of right level of public transport network. We think about the land use policies that go alongside it. And I think in terms of your question about trust as well, I think there's a wider piece that we've got to keep doing that is about engaging and speaking to people, understanding their needs, so that we can make sure that policy responses are designed better, and that decisions aren't necessarily being taken completely out of kilter with each other, because it sounds to me that that's what's happened in the example you've just raised. I'm not saying that we've got the perfect answer right now, but I do think going forward we have to look at these issues, and I think through engagement and building that kind of relationship about what people need in the local areas, and making sure that's reflected in policy and transport policy and land use policy, and even things like wider things like digital connectivity. I think that's going to be really important.
There are opportunities in the future, but we're 10 years from some of them being anything close to reality, which is not very much for someone that's just retired. They're probably not going to see it. You never know.
Yeah.
But in terms of the withdrawal of
a taxi every week to get shopping.
I think it's a really good question, Martin. And I think in terms of the sudden withdrawal of bus services, we heard from Pete, Steve earlier on just how much threat there is to the continued existence of a lot of routes across the region. And I know I'm a bit of a cracked record on this, but I think that just points up to me the reasons why it would actually be useful to have a franchising system, because we would then, as local authorities and as the local transport authority, have much more control over setting the routes, and the levels of services. But we heard how much work and how much risk is involved in actually moving to a franchising system. So I think that we're in a sense, our residents who depend on bus services, we're at the mercy of a lot of commercial decisions and uncertainties about whether we're going to get further subsidies for bus routes at the moment. And I agree, it's not a good situation. To me, it means that we need to look at some more lasting solutions that actually put people first as the passengers on public transport, and actually have an understanding of public transport as a public service. But I think we'll watch this space really with how the CA decides to go on the enhanced partnership versus the bus franchising.
Yeah, when we commission these services, we have to ensure that contractually that there is a level of trust and stability. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Any more questions on the LTP presentation? Okay, I'm not seeing any at the moment, and I think that's in a sense, that your presentation poses huge challenges and actually quite a range of almost philosophical issues about what are we prepared to advocate, particularly as local politicians, in terms of people's future choices, and behaviours. So I think there's a lot to think about, and the next year, as you go out and do the further consultation on the core strategy, is going to be really decisive, isn't it? So we wish you a lot of luck with that, and look forward to getting updates on the strategy as it develops. Thanks very much, both of you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm since we're in a bit of a time crunch now, we've got our final agenda item, which is an update on the city region sustainable transport strategy. I was tittering to myself earlier on because I think Matt referred to it as CRUSTS, which is quite good, quite a good acronym. But anyway, here we are. We've got Carl joining us now to update on the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. And I just had a quick conversation in the private chat with Lindsay, because we have a private agenda item on this, which has got the list of schemes. If anyone wants to discuss that in detail, we'll have to go into private session. So that would be at the end of all of the formal agenda items. So we'll wait to see if that's necessary, but I just wanted to flag that up. Carl, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so quite a big moment, hopefully, on Friday, having this report approved and our submission to government. I'll be as quick as I can. I'll give you a quick run through of where we were, and in particular, the agenda briefing, Chair wanted to pick up how we'd got to the programme that we got to that was submitted to the board and approved on Friday. So quick recap is this is our 5-year capital settlement for transport, moves us towards where we want to be in providing a comprehensive transport funding over a longer term period, so 5 years, and it includes integrated transport block, highway maintenance, pothole fund, a number of things rolled in together. It's not everything rolled in together, but it's some of the big transport funds that we previously received independently. We were given a range as a region of the West Midlands of between 780 and 1.2 billion. That also included some money that had previously been committed, called Transforming Cities Fund. As part of the process to determine the amount of money that we would have fixed, we submitted a business case into government in September, and our allocation of 1.05 billion was confirmed at the budget at the end of October in 2021. And really, it's been an intensive period of work across November and December to try and make our programme of projects match that budget of 1.05 billion. And what does that programme need to do? It needs to reflect the government's agenda as well as our own agenda that David and Alex discussed in our LTP, but in particular from a government perspective, focused on growth and productivity, levelling up, decarbonisation. Government also wanted to see a local contribution financially from the area of kind of a minimum of 15 to 20%. And as been mentioned earlier, this is maybe not as devolved as previous settlements that we've had, and there's been quite a lot of direction set from government on what they think the money should be spent on, and that was included in a letter from the Secretary of State at the end of last year. So really confirming the need to support the Bus Back Better bus policy document that Pete and Steve discussed earlier, and gear change, which is the government's walking and cycling document. All things that fit in with our LTP as discussed earlier, and so no real issue there, but worth highlighting. So the challenge, the mission that we chose to accept, as it were, between November and December was our programme initially was 1.7 billion. On top of that, there was a need for some funding for essential metro infrastructure. Unfortunately, we submitted a levelling up bid for £50 million that was unsuccessful, so we have to add that on to the 1.7. We were also told by government that our bus service improvement plan, it was unlikely as an area receiving this funding that we would get capital funding for that. And the CapEx element of that was around 245 million. So that gets us up to around a 2 billion pot that we needed to prioritise down to 1 billion. Within that, within our initial programme, we'd included increased amounts of money for both maintenance and integrated transport block, which is the small scale schemes. And one of the first steps was there was an agreement between leaders and cabinet members that increase should remain. So overall programme of 2 billion down to around 1 billion, with a retention of maintenance and integrated transport block at 17 and 21% increase. We've also got to deal with the continuing COVID issue and the impact that's having on public transport. So what did we do? Well, the initial process that was undertaken to get us to £1.7 billion programme is detailed here. So we started off with 228 schemes and went through a range of sifting and prioritisation. After the announcement of the allocation was confirmed at 1.05 billion, that was refined even further. So a greater focus on those government objectives they had set us, but also on deliverability. Deliverability came a key criteria. Given the reduced amount of funding compared to the overall schemes, we needed to make sure those schemes were deliverable and we're delivering the right kind of programmes. And as I mentioned earlier, we also had to include those BSIP capital projects, very important for the bus network. So tremendous amount of work over the last couple of months to make sure we had a programme that met our objectives, met government objectives, was deliverable, was affordable, and supported the LTP that David and Alex talked about earlier. And that was the programme we got to, that we took to CA board on Friday, which was a balanced programme in terms of the type of projects and geographical benefit, but also hit that 1.05 billion budget that we had. So some of the things we did to get there, obviously some projects unfortunately couldn't be funded. Many were retained and maybe some with reduced amounts. So the scope was maybe reduced slightly. Some others were kept for development only, and that really was in areas where we thought demand could be continually impacted from COVID over the delivery period. But where possible, many of the schemes were kept, and development will still take place and should be ready for delivery in the next period if they can't be delivered in this one. We also hope to prove that actually with the money that we do have, we're really delivering things that are of very high value for money. So many of the projects within the programme we would describe as being in cost terms for transport projects in that kind of medium level. So not the very small projects, so projects over 5 million, but not the mega projects, the projects that are 50 to 100 million and beyond. The programme really focuses on small to medium value, but really high returns. So very like rail and Coventry, a good example of being able to hopefully deliver mass transit at a cheaper cost than previously have been possible. Finishing off our sprint priorities, again, medium cost but very high return. Investment in bus priority, cross-city bus network, focusing on Birmingham, and a range of walking and cycling projects, as kind of alluded to in the LTP presentation. So we hope that going through these steps, we've got to a programme that it's not only affordable but is deliverable and gives the type of benefits that we would hope to achieve, supporting that LTP mentioned earlier. I won't dwell on this one. This is the list of some of the projects that made it. As mentioned earlier by the chair, there's no scheme costs associated with these because that was on the private part of the agenda. This is just really to show the spread of projects across the different local authority areas, and a similar one for projects promoted by TFWM, which, as you would imagine, focus much more on public transport, given that's the remit that we have. So what will that programme deliver? So we think we've got some excellent outputs that are going to come from this investment. So over 50 kilometres of new bus priority lanes, which would be doubling the amount we currently have in the West Midlands. Over 100 kilometres of new cycle lane, again going back to that point of the importance of increasing short distance trips with sustainable modes. Funding the project that Matt mentioned earlier, so that best value ticketing across bus operators and other operators, so being able to make the investment in Swift that we discussed earlier, upgrading engines for some of the smaller bus operators to enable them to deliver clean, high quality services, supporting over 1,600 EV charging points, a new station in Aldridge, the mass transit development of the very light rail in Coventry, improved access to a number of key employment sites across the region, and supporting a number of jobs in construction of these projects over that 5-year period, so almost 6,000 jobs there. So we think it's a project that delivers a number of really essential elements to the future transport system of the West Midlands. This slide just breaks down the different themes. The themes are based on those 6 big moves that were talked about in the LTP earlier, and shows the various splits and shows some of the kind of where some of the money is going. So in particular, Connecting Our Places programme, which is around the public transport connectivity, supporting inclusive growth, so making sure we deal with that transport equity point that was raised earlier, and supporting some areas of high deprivation, and creating resilient networks of communities, which includes our highway maintenance budget, which is around 120 million for the 5-year period. So some really big, important programme level investments there. And also still, we've retained a considerable level of local contribution, not quite as high as the original 1.7 billion pound proposal that we had in September, but around 30% coming from local authority sources, the private sector, some borrowing, and some of the other sources coming through things like the enterprise zone. So a pretty good local contribution and a commitment, I think, to sustainable transport shown across the 7 local authorities and transport for West Midlands. As we look at the programme, by mode. Whilst we do have the programme themes, people are obviously very keen to see exactly what the modal split would be in terms of funding. Around 60% is for active travel, bus, and the kind of combinations of the two, multimodal. So a very high percentage is going on the bus active travel and multimodal highway element, with some money, as we mentioned, for metros, so in particular some of the essential maintenance projects, as well as some work on future routes and some of the previously announced money that goes towards the ones through Brierley Hill Metro extension, and then money for highways maintenance that indeed is particularly important, not just for private car and van, but also for walking and cycling. I mean, the highway maintenance of the highway is important for all of our modes, and a relatively small amount for rail, which really represents that point about thinking the best use of spending on the programme, given the impact of the pandemic on demands across various different transport modes and sectors. So where are the projects? This gives an idea at a very high level about that geographical spread. And probably actually more interestingly, this is the projects against a map of indices of multiple deprivation, really trying to pull out that issue of making sure we've got the right projects in the right place, doing the right type of things for our residents, in particular walking, cycling and public transport. So we think the programme is well balanced in terms of what it's trying to deliver, where it's trying to deliver, and who it's trying to deliver for. So what are the next steps? So CA board approval was a massive milestone and really is testament to the way the region now works across the 7 authorities and TFWM, be able to do that level of prioritisation in 2 months. Slightly less than 2 months actually really was something we should be proud of as a combined authority area and local authorities. So the board paper was approved on Friday. The next step will be sometime this week, probably towards the end of the week, to submit that draft programme business case to government for them to consider more fully. So unfortunately, whilst we have approved what our schedule of programmes are locally, it does need to go through the departments, both Department for Transport and Treasury. They will then have a period of time to come back with any clarifications, whether that's on our approach or scheme specific issues, which, as I say, this is slightly less devolved than other funds and they may well have scheme specific questions they want us to address. We then hope that DFT and Treasury confirm that final allocation in March, which will allow us to take a final paper to the board to accept the funding and the funding conditions from government on the 18th of March, which will then get us in a good place to start delivering from the 1st of April for a 5-year period, and hopefully making a contribution to some of those targets and mode shift aspirations that were mentioned by David and Alex earlier. So very quick, sorry, I know I didn't have much time, so I've gone through it quite fast, so very happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thanks, Carl. That was excellent. And yes, I had asked for an overview of how you've taken those difficult decisions on prioritisation. I think that's really important because it wasn't having to reduce that down from, as you said, from 2 billion to 1 billion, and it's good to have that reassurance that it was done equitably and with the agreement of the 7 local authorities. But again, really encouraging to hear that 60% of the capital funding is going to be going towards bus and active travel schemes. And I think it's important for us to understand that this is really, for the next 5 years, this is the money that we have available to us, for transport from capital funding, isn't it? So I think we've got to absolutely maximise the benefit.
Yes.
We just hit midday, so if I was in a local Labour Party branch meeting, I'd be asking for somebody to second a request to extend the standing orders for till 12:10. So hope you'll bear with me, colleagues, and if we just let the meeting run over for 5 or 10 minutes, just so that we can get through to the end of the business. I can see that Adam's had to leave, but that's not a problem. So does anyone have questions for Carl about the sustainable transport settlement and the reprioritisation? Okay, I'll take the silence as a no. And as Carl's pointed out, there is a list in the private agenda of the financial allocations to the projects that are going to go forward. So do have a look at that. And I'm sure if you've got any questions about that, Carl and his team would be happy to deal with that offline, as it were.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thank you very much, Carl, for coming to update us. I know it's been an exceptionally busy time for you with all that work and the board meeting on Friday. So thanks for taking the time to brief us as well. And
no problem.
We'll look forward to further updates. So thank you very much.
No problem at all. So good, and extend the thanks to your local authority officers as well. As I say, a very intense piece of work in 2 months, including the Christmas holidays. And I think we are the first of the 7 mayoral combined authorities to have progressed this far, essentially, and taken a balanced programme to budget through a board. So we're slightly ahead of the pack, I think, which again shows the really joined up way that we now work, which I think is excellent.
Yeah, that is good to hear that, and I'm sure we're all, as councillors from our individual authorities, pass on the thanks for the huge amount of effort, beyond the call of duty over the festive period. So thanks very much. Okay, we'll move on then, just onto the last formal items of our agenda today. We've circulated the work programme for the last few months of the municipal year with the agenda, and also the CA's forward plan of decisions that will be being taken by the WMCA board. So we've got a question and answer session coming up in February with Councillor Kath Hartley, who chairs the Transport Delivery Committee, and then a number of items coming up in March. But just wanted to ask colleagues on the committee if they have any comments or requests for any other issues that they think we should be addressing in the forthcoming meetings in February and March.
Well,
okay. Oh, actually, Martin.
You know which one.
No, that's fine. I want people to tell me what they think.
Yeah, the feedback on the is the root cause understood, to give some confidence that we've understand the cause of the tramway failures, and we can have confidence in the action taken. It's not just more containment sold as permanent corrective action.
Absolutely. So to make sure that we've got in the minutes the questions that you raised regarding that, and I think we should keep in mind the possibility of the private briefing. Obviously, that Anne has set out the constraints that there are about sharing some of the information if it's commercially confidential, but I really would like us to get to the bottom of what happened there. So yes, very good point.
If we struggle with the personal the industrial confidentiality or commercial confidentiality, the fact that we have a clear and unequivocal statement from the regulator that the root cause has been established beyond reasonable doubt, and that the actions taken are recognise that root cause, and also that the potential for this happening in the future is also reduced by that understanding and the systemic actions taken. Excuse me.
Okay, well, I think we need to, I'll talk to Lindsay and Dan offline about maybe where we could think about scheduling the private session, because obviously, if we continue to not be happy with what we're being told about this, or not be confident that that such problems won't reoccur, we could actually think about doing a task and finish piece of work or some kind of inquiry work. I mean, I've held off from suggesting that at the moment, because I've understood that there is going to be an independent review. So I think we need to find out more about that before we move to doing a parallel and possibly duplicating piece of work. But definitely, I think this is a really serious issue, and for me, it totally undermined people's confidence, in the reliability of the tram network. So there's a lot of ground to be made up here. I can see that Ian wants to come in.
Yes, I agree entirely with Martin. And one aspect of that I was thinking was, when was the decision to buy Spanish trams taken, and by whom? And also, I'd like to, as the comment you made a few minutes ago about what would you like to discuss, I would like to discuss the concept of smaller buses out of peak times, or in peripheral areas where smaller bodies, probably under, say, 15-20 seaters, on peripheral areas and out of peak times, where we could have far less capital investment in the bus fleet, and still do the job. And it may help with congestion, and it may help also with driver recruitment, because we don't need a double decker or an enormously long single decker in some areas out of peak time. There's no doubt about it. And I think we ought to look at this aspect of a broader fleet.
Again, really good point, and I think that's something that we could think about getting National Express in and some of the other bus operators to talk about that. I mean, some of these, a session like that possibly might take us into the next municipal year, and it'll be a matter for whoever's chairing the committee next year to sort of determine that. But certainly on the scrutiny committee that I chair in Birmingham, we've had some quite good roundtable sessions with the TFWM and bus operators discussing sort of issues like that, or it might be something that we could pick up with Kath Hartley as well, from the transport delivery aspect. But I can see Lindsay wants to come in.
Yes, thank you. You've just touched on the point there. I was going to suggest maybe it's something that can be discussed with Councillor Kath Hartley as part of your Q&A session with her, and what Transport Delivery Committee are seeking to do with that area of work.
Yeah, let's pick it up then and then see where we get to in the discussion with Catherine. I completely understand where Ian's coming from, because I think at the moment there's a general problem that most of the buses that I go on or I see are more or less empty, except for very busy times on and around school start and school leaving times in Birmingham, because lots of kids are going to school by bus. But I think particularly on some of our outer lying estates, the small sort of hopper buses probably are more appropriate than even single deckers. So I do think, yes, it's a good issue to raise, and let's start with putting it to Kath Hartley. I've got one suggestion that I was going to make. I met the new active travel commissioner who's been appointed by the mayor, Adam Tranter, and his role is going to be to promote walking and cycling and active travel. And again, I think it would just be interesting to talk to him while he's still fairly fresh in the role, and to understand his priorities. So that's something that I'd like us to consider on the agenda as well.
Okay.
Martin, did you want to come back? Or is that a legacy hand?
It's a legacy hand. I've stopped choking now, but yes, I'd largely finished what I got to say. Well, I'd like to add to the earlier councillor comment our colleague has made there, that more localised, smaller buses should be part of the feeder buses, or minibuses, are both suitable for electric drive rather than the big ones, and also semi or fully autonomous operation, which with the size of the starts to make them financially viable potentially. Okay.
Thanks very much. Yeah, and again, let's keep that logged as a question that we put to Kath Hartley initially, and then we can, I think, some sort of round table session with the bus operators would help us to get further down the line of those issues. Okay, are there any further comments or suggestions for the work programme? Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions or queries, so I think we can draw it to a close now, unless anyone's got. Is there anybody who wants to ask questions about the private report? Okay, I'll take silence as a no in that case then. So I'll close the meeting for today, and yes, apologies for running over, and apologies again to Councillor Hare for misunderstanding what he was trying to ask Pete Bond. I didn't mean to be rude there, so I hope you'll forgive me there, Gurdev. And just to say then, our next meeting is on the 23rd of February. Is that the right date, Lindsay?
Yes, it is, Chair. And the committee also has a pre-meeting on the 5th of February to go through any areas or potential lines of inquiry to ask Councillor Kath Hartley.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Yes, we've got that preparatory session, which I think is essential for us to sort of get our act together and actually have a list of questions that we can fit into the time. Actually, one thing I was going to say to you was, is it possible or appropriate to invite Councillor Vera Waters to this meeting? Because I know that, like me, she is a frequent traveller on buses, and I've been to a number of meetings where she's asking questions about passenger satisfaction or the accessibility of buses. I think she might be interested to be part of that session with Kath Hartley.
She does ask some good questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. We can do that. And apologies, the workshop session is actually on the 9th of February.
Yeah, I thought it was Saturday, Lindsay. I thought, oh, we're keen.
No, not working on Saturday. It's the 9th of February.
Yeah, we're not asking staff to work on Saturdays, and I'm sure a number of us will be out. A number of us will be out knocking doors anyway, so you wouldn't see us.
Yes.
Anyway,
Send an invite to that, please.
Yes,
I've seen one yet.
it should be in your diary.
Workshop.
Yeah, it should be in your
Oh, okay.
diary. If not, let me know and I'll resend it to you.
What time was it? Did you say the 3rd of February?
The 9th.
That's the 9th.
Good night.
The 9th at 10 o'clock.
Okay. Yes.
So we've got the calendar invite, and then there'll be further information about it from Lindsay as we get closer to the time. Okay, well, thanks everybody for your patience today. It's quite a heavy agenda, but I certainly learned a lot, from all of those reports, and it's exciting times. Some big threats out there, but also some big opportunities. So thanks very much, and see you on the 9th of February. And if Dan and Lindsay could just stay on the call for a bit, so just